Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of the Feminine Mashriq. In today's episode, we'll be discussing Annemarie Jacir's 2017 film, Wajib. My guest today is Syrian-American filmmaker and podcaster Shereen Younes.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Feminine Mashriq. I'm joined by Shereen Younes, who is a wonderful filmmaker and podcaster as well. Do you have any projects in the works right now as far as filmmaking goes?
I'll be honest and say it's been hard for me to be productive and creative right now, but there is a film that I have been working on even before all this happened. I'm trying to write my first feature. It is a very hard process for me. Writing is excruciating, but I'm still working on it. I'm working on my first one and also some other little projects on the side, but the main baby that I am hoping to produce in the near future is a feature script. So, yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks.
So, what does being an Arab filmmaker mean to you specifically?
Well, that's a lot.
That's a big question.
It is. Growing up, I didn't know I could be a filmmaker. I know that's like pretty cliche, but I'm Syrian. My parents are Syrian immigrants, and I never saw a Syrian person on the TV. I never saw a Syrian person behind the camera or directing anything. I genuinely didn't know it was an option, and I really loved art and photography. I was a huge poetry nerd, and I was obsessed with photography as well, and so when I found film, it was like a union of photography and poetry to me, that in the perfect way. And I started I was one of those kids that just always had a camera on them, and but it was always just like something silly I did. I never thought I could do anything with that passion. And my parents, they're supportive now, but at the time they didn't get it. And I guess being an Arab filmmaker, and especially an Arab woman, and I'm a queer Arab woman, I'm trying to represent myself and the little version of myself that's out there somewhere that desperately needs to be seen. If anything else, being an Arab woman in the industry in general, I am making that small version of myself that's out there somewhere feel less alone, because that's all I could hope for. Like you kind of accept the scraps you're given when you're not represented, and I'm sure you can understand that, but that's what it means to me. It means representing the child in me and representing the child in me that I know exists out there dozens of times over. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I was born in the States, and I grew up in Georgia, and I did not have a lot of Arab friends. I didn't see myself yet in TV shows or movies. And I just remember going to our local movie stores and digging through everything and trying to find anything that was about even just Greece, or even about even a Persian film. I was just trying to find some piece of that. And when I finally was starting to get access to Nadine Labaki's films and films like that, I was like, oh yeah, there's this wealth of cinema. I just can't get my hands on it. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And I remember I think in middle school, if you asked me who my favorite actor was, I would have been Tony Shalhoub from Monk, because he was the only Lebanese person I knew on TV. And he never even gets to play Lebanese characters, which is frustrating.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of Arabs really love My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I feel like every immigrant family, Greek or not, attaches to that film, because we were seen in that, even though it wasn't our ethnicity at all. It's just seeing an immigrant family interacting with a white dude and trying to acclimate, you know what I mean? That's why I think so many, you are reaching for representation. And I remember feeling I remember Shakira back in the day came out with a version of her song that was both in Arabic and in English, and I think also in Spanish. And I remember I was like, oh my God, she's singing in Arabic. that's fucking wild. Like, what? So I remember these moments here and there, and like even like actresses like Salma Hayek, who gets a lot of credit for being Hispanic, I think she should get equal credit for being of Middle Eastern origin. Like, that's like, her name's Selma. Like, my friend was named Selma. You know what I mean? Like, those little things that like you never know what will last as a kid and what you will resonate with. But yeah, I totally understand. Like, just searching for anything, just for any type of just to be seen. Yeah.
Have you seen her? She produced an animated version of The Prophet.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
It's really cute. It's sweet.
Yeah.
But so even when I was finding the list of films that I thought were really necessary to show, this is like Wajib was one of the ones that I wanted to show, but a couple of them are like third picks because what you can stream in the West is a very specific kind of film. And like Western audiences want to see war, and they want to see poverty.
Yeah.
And they want to see American soldiers coming in and saving the day. So it's hard because there are a lot of incredible genre films from the MENA region, and I can't get my hands on them to stream because initially this series was going to be in person, and then the pandemic happened, so we decided to make it virtual. And so now I've got, these films are incredible, but they're all kind of these neo-realist films. So even the way that we can access these films is kind of frustrating and feels kind of gatekeepery in a way.
Yeah, no, I completely see that. And like, even in the recent, maybe like 4 years, I want to say, Palestine in particular has been the subject of a lot of like TV and movies, like in a way that I wasn't really prepared for, like whether it's like Fauda on Netflix or like I was really impressed with the one on HBO called Our Boys, because it was a Palestinian filmmaker was one of the 3 filmmakers that was involved, and so it did a really good job of trying to represent the quote-unquote conflict like in a really like nuanced way. But you're right, it's all the examples of in recent memory of any type of Arab filmmaking or something set, let alone in the Middle East, is so painful. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, like, I haven't watched a lot of Arab cinema. I've watched a good amount, but it's painful for me to watch. Like, that's the reason why I have to, you're right, you have to dig deep to not find the only surface level painful ones that white people can like romanticize about and like feel superior then when they watch it. No offense to, I mean, I casually say white people all the time, but you know what I mean. It's like what like a Western audience has a very particular view of the Middle East. You can see that in any kind of Hollywood movie that is set in the Middle East that has Middle Eastern characters. There's a reason why up until recent history, like up until like, I don't know, Rami came out, like every Middle Easterner on TV was like violent and a terrorist. Like I've been called slurs growing up. It's just kind of like the norm. But you're right, it is very gatekeepery because the beautiful elements of our culture seem far away, and because everyone's focusing on the headlines and the violence, and especially in regards to Palestine is depicted as a very painful place, and in a lot of ways it very much is, and I'm a huge activist for the Palestinian cause, but what I liked about this film is that the generational trauma is very prominent, but there's no violence at any turn. There's no mention of any kind of like that visceral image that we always see in the news. But it's there. It's there, and it's part of their lives. But this film is on paper, it's a mundane activity. There's father and son driving around. But their conversations are so real. As a Syrian woman, like, I can relate to every word they said. I can relate to every house they went into. I loved it so, so much. And there was a beauty to it that I think a lot of Western audiences maybe aren't familiar with.
Yeah, so Annemarie Jacir said that because someone talked to her about her movies, and they were like, when are you going to stop making political stuff? And she was like, I'm not making political films. I'm making films about my life as a Palestinian woman. Like, because even, I think what this film does so beautifully is the way they use the car radio. Because it's so much of the, like in the opening scene, it says something like the trains will no longer have announcements in Arabic. And it's like, just that they're getting in the car just ready to go celebrate this wedding that's going to happen, and it's like, cool, another little piece of us is being taken away.
Yeah, you're so right. It's like a background noise that they're just accustomed to. And like in the middle, or like the second half of the film, there's an announcement about shipments being stopped, like the halted in Gaza, which is literally happening right now. But it's just like this radio noise, and it's just, that's their life. And there's even a line where a character says, like, they wanted to get land in Nazareth, but there's none available. This is our life. And they shrug and they continue drinking their tea. It's just like, it was heartbreaking in ways I wasn't expecting. Like, I think I love that she said that, like, because I feel like even in America, our existence as Middle Eastern women is inherently political to some people, and it's inherently, like, just even existing is an act of activism, I feel like it just, and I think there's a reason why when someone learns I'm Syrian, they immediately ask me about the politics of Syria. Like, I don't really, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just where their mind goes. And it's hard to just, like, depict life as an Arab person, especially as a Palestinian woman that grew up in Palestine. It's not activism just to depict life as you know it, but it is for some people that just assume that their idea of normalcy is being disrupted by your existence. It's just, it's mind-boggling. I'm sure you've gotten questions like that too, like someone immediately figuring out what you are, and they're like, what do you think of ISIS? I got that question so many times. What do you think of ISIS? That's not a question.
Same.
Like, what?
I'm like, are you expecting me to just be like, oh, let me tell you, ISIS is doing some stuff. Like, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
I remember it was like my first day at my college campus, and we were going around and just talking, and I was like, oh, I'm nervous. I hope I make friends. I hope college isn't hard. And someone was like, cool. So what do you think about everything that's going on in the Middle East? And I was like, what do you mean everything?
Yeah.
Like,
they mention it like a casual thing. I've gotten that question so many times. Like, it's the most absurd, loaded question, and they say it so casually and so confidently. It blows my mind every time. It's appalling. It's truly,
Friends out there, non-Middle Eastern friends, don't ask people this unless you guys are very close and it feels to talk about.
I mean, I'll answer questions. I'm an open book. You can ask me anything and I'll answer it, but I'm like, if someone tells me I'm not going to take a traumatic topic and use that as the first question I ask someone. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just not going to do that because I have common fucking sense. But you know, I don't know. Not everyone has that, I suppose.
Something also that's interesting about the film is, like, these are two kind of like middle class guys who are living in Nazareth. Like, even that identity in itself has like a bit of privilege around it, because they even see the child from the West Bank and they're like, since when is this happening here?
Yeah.
So it's even, I love that she picked a person that's like still being oppressed, but not even in the worst ways that are happening.
Yeah. I really appreciated that as well. It wasn't like presenting this completely underdog character that is flawless and victimless, or what's the word? Blameless. I mean, like, it's not. It's, and I don't think that I think showing that hierarchy is important, and I think that was a big crux of the argument that goes down between the father and the son, is the father doing what he thought was best for his family and doing the best he could to provide this in his mind, very privileged life for his children, and kind of maybe going against his own morals in a way. And I'm being vague because I think everyone should watch this film. It's free on Amazon Prime. I'm sure you can find it at other places. You have to watch it, so I don't want to give too much away of like the crux of it unless you want to spoil it. It's up to you. But it's so good, I also, something that I loved was that they're actually father and son. Like,
I was like, why don't we do this for every film?
Yeah. It was just they interacted so naturally, like, especially as an Arab speaker. I don't know if you related to this at all, but sometimes when there's Arabic on the screen and then people subtitling, there are things the translation always misses, and that's not anything against translation. It's just more there's beauty in the language that you really can't translate. Like there's layers of a phrase that an Arabic speaker would recognize and not necessarily it's lost in translation, for lack of a better phrase. But I think those subtle glances between the father and the son, and those little phrases that were said, it was like it could have happened without the cameras being there, because they have that naturalism between them, and they have that really realist, like, it brought you right there, and it makes you feel like you're a fly on the wall, like you're just an observer watching it happen. And then you kind of remind yourself, like, the filmmaker isn't an observer. She's like the furthest thing from an observer to this life. Like, she knows the Palestinian life intimately, and I just thought it was so brilliant the way she let us look into this world that she knows so well, and it was crafted so well because it's her life. But at the same time, I don't know if I was so impressed with how I was just able to sit with these characters for like an hour and a half and kind of feel like I was at home, and like, while at the same time learning about something. It was just, it's multi-layered. Yeah, I don't know. I loved this film. It's phenomenal.
So the director got the idea because her husband's little sister was getting married, and he's from Nazareth, and he was like, all right, I gotta go home and I gotta pass out invitations with my dad. And she was like, this is amazing, because her family doesn't do this tradition anymore. And she was like, can I please just sit in the back seat? And her husband was like, yeah, I guess, sure. And so she sits in the back seat as they're doing this exact thing that they're doing in the film. And she said,
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And she said the most interesting thing was the things that they were not saying to each other.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that it's like, and I don't want to make a generalization. This feels cross-cultural, that men just don't have the same tendency to talk openly about things. And she was like, if you have to put them in a car, they have to speak to each other. And so when they're getting in that fight, they have to be in the car until it boils to a head and Shabby gets out of the car and is like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And I think it's so, so good. Because this is a film, this whole film series is about film made by Arab women. But this movie isn't about Arab women. And I think that her touch is so nice in it, though.
I agree. And knowing that that was her inspiration for the film makes sense that we feel like a fly on the wall. Like, that's probably what she felt. Like, she was probably just trying to just, like, minimize and just, like, be an observer and just, like, try to see what, like, just everything take place. I don't know. That's fascinating to me. Yeah. I mean, she's just brilliant. Like, as a filmmaker, I'll admit that I have some catching up to do as far as her filmography is concerned, but, like, I took notes on the film. That's why I might be looking off to the side. So. But like her short was the first Arab short ever in history to be a selection at Cannes. Like, it's just like,
yeah. Well, her film Salt of the Sea was the first feature made by a Palestinian woman in Palestine.
That's incredible. It's incredible, but also like kind of depressing, because she's like a modern, like not that much for or older than me kind of thing. Like, yeah. But there's this film is beautiful to watch, and the directing is impeccable, and I think especially there's like some dialogue about this, but you see these old buildings that have so much history, and they're beautiful. They're just it's a Palestine the news won't show you. You know what I mean? It's a Palestine that the news isn't going to draw attention to, because they just want to focus on the violence. And I think bringing in a son that has been living outside of Palestine to a father that is very traditional in his thinking, I think that clash that happens between them and their differing of opinions, I think it's really interesting because, I don't know, it boils down to everything. It's their wardrobe, it's his hairstyle, it's his views of politics, it's his views of relationships and marriage and monogamy. It's like a very, you would think it's been done before over and over again, but the reality is we haven't seen it this way ever, for especially as modern Arabs. Like, to see it spelled out is so refreshing and at once like really comforting to me, because I feel like I could have had those conversations myself with my family, and I feel like a lot of Americans already feel that way with a lot of like coming of age stories or whatever, but this is new for us. You know, this is so new to see these conversations happen in Arabic. And yeah, you're right. The fact that it's an Arab woman directing this father and son duo, that's like badass. Like, so you don't have to. God, it's cool. Like, but you see men do it all the time. Men direct stories about women all the time, and they don't get a second glance. Like, the vast majority of these amazing films about women, especially up until like, I don't know, 10 years ago, they're all directed by men, written by men. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's about time. Like, it shouldn't be a shock that she can do this well, is what I'm trying to say. It should be like just a nod to her abilities, if anything else.
And these two actors, Mohammed Bakri and Safed Bakri, are massive Palestinian actors.
Mm-hmm.
They're the father is a director and has been in the industry for eons, and I think all three of his sons are actors as well. And
nice.
He works with Annemarie Jacir a lot, which is cool. And I think you can tell they seem so comfortable with, like, not just with each other, but like in the film, they seem comfortable enough to like be raw. Abu Shadi is so heartbreaking to me, because he is so dedicated to Wajib, to his social duty, and his wife has left him, his son has left him, he's about to have to lose his daughter because she's getting married and going to move away, and the only thing he can do is like side with these Israeli people to hope that they'll give him a job as a headmaster.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, being a fly on the wall and watching this conversation between the father and son is, you just want to pull the son away and be like, you need to be nicer to your dad.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, I need to be nicer to my dad too. So that's also how I feel, is because I too would be frustrated seeing my dad do this.
Yeah, but it's true. You have to remember, I feel like I argued with my parents so much. I'm the middle child, and I was definitely like the troublemaker out of my sisters. Like, I was like more rebellious than them, and I got into a lot of trouble with my parents in particular, but it wasn't until I was older that I realized they were just doing their best, and they didn't do I do have some like lingering things that I think I'm trying to get over, but this, like, Abu Shadi, like, he truly was doing his best, like, especially after I think the film does this really well. It really draws attention to the value in the culture of the Arab culture of appearances, and the fact that his wife left him, like, yes, that hurts a lot, but what hurt even more, it for the Arab culture, is like humiliating the family and reconstructing his life after that and still becoming a respectable teacher. That is harder than I think his son realizes. And I think you're right. I was watching it, and it almost felt like the son didn't get it. And his sister even says, like, you don't get it, do you? Like, you don't get it. Like, you don't understand. Either you've been away too long or you're just being willfully ignorant, but there are certain things you just have to bend about, you know? You can't just be a stick in the mud. And it's easy. I think it's very easy, especially for a privileged man, to come in and be like, you should do things this way and this way and this way. And it undermines the struggle that his father went through. But you're right. He was a heartbreaking character to me too, because what other choice does he have? You know, what other choice is there? He's surviving. He's coping. And yeah, I think it's interesting to see it as a young person, because you can empathize with the son, but also really the film does a really good job of humanizing the father as well. And it's just, yeah, because it's these mundane conversations that deal with these very real circumstances of the occupation and the struggle for liberation, the importance of a homeland and of identity in spite of not having a homeland, or like, it's I don't know, it just makes it real. And I think, especially because it's a real father and son duo, and even if it wasn't, it would still land the same. But generational trauma is such a real thing, and it affects each generation in a different way. And you're right, like as we said before, like they are more privileged than other people in Palestine, but there's still trauma there because it's inherent from it's just innate. It's just a part of life. But I really loved it because it shows how this generational trauma comes out in these like insidious ways that you don't expect. And at the same time, I thought it was also really funny at times. Like, it was like hilarious. It was a hilarious movie when you really think about it. That was also layered with pain. But that wasn't the point. You know, the pain wasn't the point. It was really just like, I just thought it did such a good job of humanizing Palestinians. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
It's so fun and funny how, so this duo is trying to keep up appearances. Isn't the dad lying that he's a doctor or something?
Yes.
Yeah. He's like, a doctor that's in America, I think, is what the lie is. And he's like, no, I'm going to be an architect. What are you talking about? But all of these people that we're meeting along the way are kooky. Like, the woman with the parrots is me in 20 years, and I'm fine with it.
Yeah. That's what I felt too. I felt like, yes, they were all kooky, but I have an aunt kind of like that. You know what I mean? Like, it was an aunt. We all have an aunt in that image, is what I'm trying to say. We all have that the strangeness in that family in some element, in some way or another. And like, I found myself looking forward to every house they were going to go into and every interaction they were going to have, because it was so relatable. Like having them sit down in this like very formal guest room and having these surface level conversations that are very weighted and very layered and just like sound on the surface like very polite, but like there's more there. It's so relatable. And like all of these characters, like whether it's the parrot lady or the that guy that just talked like insanely slow, like it was so funny to watch because we all know someone like that. And I'd be curious to see like what a white American would think about these characters, because for me, I agree, they are kooky, but they're also real. Like, they're also like accurate. And I'm sure I would like to think that there's still something there that someone that isn't Arab could relate to. The same way that we related to My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's because of the family dynamic and because of the characters in the family being so outrageous, but also very real. Yeah.
It was so refreshing and fun. Just each house. The woman that like pushes him into the chair and like starts making out with him, I was like, all right, let's do it. Yeah. It was just all so fun.
And it's also just like, every conversation they had about smoking, I've had that conversation with every single family member of mine. Like, I've tried in every which way to get my parents to stop smoking, and for the most part, they have stopped. So credits to them, but they still smoke occasionally, and it makes me mad. But just that there's a scene that I thought was so real where someone they visit offers the dad a cigarette. The dad's like, no thanks, I quit, even though he's been smoking the whole time. I had a heart attack. And he's like, oh, what about you, Shadi? He's like, no, I also quit. He's like, oh, you also have a heart attack? He's like, no. And he's like, well, and then he lights up a cigarette, this guy, and he was like, they will kill you. But he just continues to smoke. It's just like, you know what, that's smart. They're going to kill you. My uncles have said that thousands of times. You know what I mean? Like, good for you. You don't smoke. This will kill me. But, here I go. It's just like, I just loved how natural every conversation felt. It was just so real. It didn't feel like there was a script. It just felt like we were on this journey that was just all like semi-documentary, semi-whatever. It was so fun to watch, to be a witness to.
Right. As a filmmaker, dialogue is something that I find so intimidating. And
I hate writing dialogue. I'm so bad at writing dialogue.
I cut as much of it as I possibly can for the story to still make sense. And this film was like, nope, we are dialogue driven, and it's so good. It's so real. Yeah. It sounds like people talking, and that's hard.
It inspired me. It inspired me to try to do that because, and maybe it's easier when you have worked with the actors before, when the actors know each other very well. Maybe that makes it easier, but the majority of my filmmaking, I like less like I don't really like talking. I like atmospheric direction, and I like more imagery, and like maybe it's because I like photography and like it influences my framing and stuff. But I also think it's because you're right, dialogue is hard to pull off, and I'm working on it in this project I'm working on now to just try to like to have these conversations on paper that can happen in real life, because this film, like, if anything else, was an inspiration for that. It's inspiring to see a film that truly feels like improv without being mumblecore. You know what I mean? It's not actually, you can tell there's a script, but you can also tell that they could have said this without a script. But I'm glad you agree that dialogue's intimidating, because it is hard. It is so hard. It's so hard.
So many of the characters of the film are just in the periphery and we never see them, we never hear from them. But I feel like the mom, the girlfriend who's in Italy, and her dad are three of the main characters. And I think that that's so good. It's like, it's amazing that I feel like I know a lot about these people, and we never interact with them. And all three of them, I feel like, are Abu Shadi's enemies, unfortunately. The dad that was in the PLO, I think, was such a good character to have. Yes. And Abu Shadi being like, just the price of his car could feed a refugee camp. And him being so scared that his son thinks of this man as a hero and doesn't think of him as that way. And it's this really interesting, I think, parent insecurity that, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I'm assuming that must come up from time to time if you're a parent. Like,
no, his line when he said that broke my heart, because I didn't know if it was going to come out in such a blunt way, but then I was reminded that, like, I'm sure you understand this, Arabs are very blunt, and like Arabs are like, I mean, like, even me, I have no filter. I say exactly what's on my mind. And I think it's because I'm Syrian. Like, I think it's because I grew up my whole life, and the minute you enter a room, your family member will tell you if you've gotten fat or not. You know what I mean? It's just like, being blunt is just a part of being Arab sometimes, I feel like.
It's cultural.
But when he said that line, it broke my heart, because there was so much truth to it. And I agree. I think that character choice was so smart, because again, it brings up the idea of a homeland. And even though his girlfriend Neda, right, I think that's her name, even though she's Palestinian, she's not allowed to come back. They say she's forbidden, and
she has to become European to get to come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that line. Like, that's what I mean about these mundane conversations that are, and you have to pay attention because they go by just because they're normal conversations that aren't they aren't so weighty. But it's because it's their everyday life and they've been forced to believe it's normal, and because it is normal to them. And it was to have a father that in his son's mind has sacrificed his morals, idolize his like pseudo father-in-law like figure, like his girlfriend's father, in a way that like, and you can tell he respects him. You can tell he respects this guy different than he respects his father, because and that kind of really broke my heart, because the father is just, again, trying his best. But yeah, I thought it was this idea of being denied a homeland and having it be something that Palestinians have to become accustomed to. It was, I'm sure a Palestinian could watch this and relate to it immediately, and that's like devastating. It's a devastating thing to reconcile, because so many people, I feel like the majority of people have an attachment to some type of homeland, and they probably feel a duty or like a wajib to that homeland. And I think that's why the title also is layered. Like, it's not just a duty to the family or a duty to do this family tradition of handing out invitations. It's also the father's duty to do his best to take care of his children after his wife leaves him. And it's, you know, it's a very multi-faceted dilemma that she presents to us, while still maintaining an impeccable sense of like humanity, and I can just rave about this film forever. But yeah, I really liked it, and the juxtaposition between the modern and the traditional with the father and son, like whether it was like that conversation about his cousin,
oh god, I love that part.
Yes,
especially because they have chemistry too.
Oh yeah. The
way they shoot those two characters, you're like, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that conversation that they have about the cousin, about how she was married, she didn't get married. She lived with someone, and when they broke up, even though she's a successful lawyer, she's a brilliant person, she's beautiful on paper and otherwise, she's regarded as the plague. And her male counterpart, the person that she was with, is married with kids now. You know, like, there's a sexism that this film deals with. There's racism this film deals with. It's so many things. It's so many things, and it still feels accessible. And I really love that this film was on Amazon, because I think it should be accessible. And I really do think that you don't have to be Arab to see the brilliance of this film. It is objectively a good film. Like, it's objectively a great fucking film. This is the first line that I wrote down that really fucked me up. Do you know what happens in this country if you hurt an animal? Especially an Israeli one. Like, you don't need the second part, but that first line, it wrecked me. I was just like, because it's implying that Palestinians are second to a dog.
Yeah.
And it's not a conversation that lingers. It kind of passes.
It's like,
it wrecked me. It wrecked me for sure.
Yeah, it's A+ dog acting too. That dog was hurt.
That dog was out for the count. Yeah.
This kind of expensive looking frou-frou-y white dog. And normally people are so conditioned to be like, oh, a dog gets hurt, we gotta kill that character. How terrible. Right. But you're like, get the hell out of there. Like, you have to go. Because there's gonna be no mercy for two Palestinian men that hit.
That will probably be like did it on purpose in their minds. Like, oh, you
Exactly.
came into this neighborhood to do some mean things and wreak havoc on us. Like, it would be twisted against them, and you know it.
And for anyone listening who isn't super familiar, the imagery I feel like I see most of Palestine is checkpoints, and it's people not being allowed to just move throughout their country in the way they want to. And I feel like, and these are become sensationalized, but there's always like a story of a pregnant Palestinian woman who doesn't make it to the hospital in time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's such a heartbreaking image to see these men so terrified of hitting a dog. Because like in a lot of ways, in more so in the West Bank, more so in Gaza, but Palestinians are treated worse than dogs. And it's just heartbreaking. And it's so genius the way that portion is handled, because it could have been so heavy-handed. It could have been so overly dramatic or heartbreaking, and it's just like that short exchange is perfect and is so effective.
I agree completely. It was done so well, and you can feel the fear that these grown men feel, especially Abu Shadi, especially the dad. Like, yeah, it's like everything he worked for can be shattered in a moment. And everything all the things that he's had to kind of come to terms with and like reconcile within himself, like that could all be taken away. I don't know, it was that's something that's impressive about this movie. It's that it's every so often it really hits you with a really real heavy thing, and it goes on to the next. And I think it's because that's the reality of Palestinian life, especially in Palestine. Like, you have to continue to live, you have to continue to survive, and it becomes normal. It becomes normal to be like, this is our life. Continue drinking your tea, continue smoking your cigarette. Like, that's just, if anything else, they're coping. They're coping with extreme trauma that has been there again for generations. And yeah, I think, I don't know the viewpoints of everyone listening to this or watching or listening to this. Like, it's obviously a very, for whatever reason, controversial thing to care about Palestinian lives. But I urge you to at least make an effort to hear and read Palestinian voices, and know that the US media especially skews everything into a way that makes Arabs into an inherently violent species. So yeah, I urge everyone to stay skeptical and like seek out information for themselves. And I don't want to, this is not my show, but I just wanted to put that out there because I think being being an Arab person talking about Palestine or even mentioning Israel in a less than flattering way, I've been like berated on the internet countless of times. Like, I'm like used to it at this point, but like is that the right word? I don't know. English is my second language. I don't know what the right words are. But what I'm saying is, it's it kind of makes me nervous sometimes, and I'm trying, and the more I talk about it, the less I will be nervous, because it shouldn't be controversial to stand up for Palestinians, and because it's not a political issue, it's not a religious issue, it's a human rights issue. And I urge everyone to listen, if you don't know enough, to just do your own research and seek out sources that truly are unbiased and see both sides. And I do think this film is a good starting point. Like, see Palestinian filmmaking, like see the life from the ground. It doesn't have to be a violent documentary. This is a beautiful film that doesn't have sensationalized violence. So those are my 2 cents.
No, thank you for that. it's so hard for a Palestinian to make a film in Palestine too, especially if there is any travel involved, especially if the actor that you want lives in a different part of the country. The script has to get approved, the cast has to get approved, the crew has to get approved. So when films like this get made, it feels like a miracle, honestly.
Yeah.
When films that are this honest and this well done, it's such a joy, and I'm so happy that it's on Amazon. Like you were saying earlier, I can't believe it's this accessible because of how we were talking earlier, and the films that are not accessible for us in the West.
I agree. I'm so glad it's on. I mean, I'm glad and also surprised that it's on Amazon. But that being said, you can watch it, whoever you are out there. You know what I mean? Like, and I urge you to. If you love filmmaking, don't only watch films that you see yourself in. Like, Arabs have been doing that for far too long. Like, we've been forced to watch so many films, especially if you've been in a film class. Like, I've never related to any film that I've seen. Like, I mean, like, it sounds, I mean, that's absurd. I'm sure you can find nuggets to relate to here and there, like slivers of little things, especially when it's like, I don't know, about depression or like about like being a woman in general. Like, I'm sure you can find things here and there. But if you really take a moment to, if you want to say that you love film, see films that you aren't like visible in. You know, because that's actual life. Like, you don't have to only watch a film with a white protagonist or a white dude protagonist. Like, it's an opportunity to really like expand your knowledge of filmmaking. And like, I think the filmmakers I respect, their influences and the people that they always attribute to like that inspired them, they aren't from one country. They're from Korea, they're from Iran, they're from Russia. And that's what I really try to remind myself of. Like, my favorite films are international. And this is definitely one of them now. Like, 100%. Like, I'm going to watch the rest of her work. Like, she's phenomenal. And the fact that if she's her film was the first ever Palestinian film the first feature film made by a Palestinian woman. Like, that's incredible, including all the obstacles she has to overcome. Like, that's not something to be taken lightly. That's revolutionary. That's incredible. And I guess inherently, as the Western can put it, like, yeah, an act of activism or whatever. But her existence is incredibly inspirational. And I hope her film being on Amazon is a good indication of her being normalized as a filmmaker and as a director. Like, I don't want people to keep saying female director. I don't want people to keep saying female filmmaker. She's just a fucking filmmaker. She's just a fucking sick director. Like, she is fucking great as a director, and she holds up to any other male counterpart.
This was Palestine's official entry for the Academy Awards, but it was not nominated.
Yeah, I saw that, or I read that.
Yeah, which is wild.
It is wild. It is wild. I don't know how. I want to bring up this film only because it was like, it's a very recent film that I'm sure has gotten a lot of press, but I still know, like, the vast majority of the people I know haven't even seen it yet. And it was also nominated for an Oscar last year or the year before, but Capernaum, Lebanese filmmaker Nadine Lebaki, even though it was nominated for an Oscar, I don't know anyone that has seen it other than maybe like 2 people. You know what I mean? Like even though a film can get to that caliber, and even though it can get so much good press, it is still not accessible. It is still really not available widely. And that is tragic to me. Like it's a disservice to filmmakers everywhere, especially the filmmakers involved, who like literally put a mortgage on their house to just make the film. Like it's crazy. And I mean, that film. Oh. We could talk at the end if you want to talk about different films. I can bring it up again, but that film fucked me up. Yeah.
Oh man, that is required viewing.
Yes,
but also
I agree.
be prepared.
Yeah.
You on Instagram posted was a stat about writers' rooms, I think, about the major Hollywood films.
Yeah.
Kind of breaking it down in demographic.
I think this is what you're talking about. By POC _ Directors Collective.
All of these statistics are heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's just not good. It's not a good look for anybody. It's not a good look. Of the writers for the top Hollywood films, there's only 5.2% that are black, 3% that are Asian, 0.7 that are Latinx. The multi-category is 1.5, and literally it says 0% Native and MENA, like or Middle Eastern, North African. We know that representation is terrible. We know that Hollywood is usually, there's a reason why white stories are seen as the blueprint or as the default. Yeah, like a white character is seen as just like a character. You don't specify that they're white. They're just like the what's it called? Like they're just like the prototype for human. Like that's like, there it is. It's a white dude. But there's a reason why that we're so badly represented. It's because the people that are making movies, they don't look like us. They don't really value our stories, and our stories are just stories to them. Before people can retort and be like, what about Rami, and what about this, what about that? Like Rami literally brand new. I hope the first of many. But absolutely. There's a reason why it's so groundbreaking. And I really like Rami for a lot of reasons, but the same kind of reason that I like Arab filmmaking, but the fact that it's an American show is amazing. But just hearing Arabic words, hearing Arabic music in a show that was made in America and feeling seen is not something that I am used to yet, and it makes me emotional every time. And I am 30 years old. Like I am it's not something to be taken for granted, and I think a lot of white people take it for granted because I shouldn't get emotional every time I hear my native language, but I do. And I do think the things that are lost in translation, whether it's in Rami, whether it's in any other Arab thing that's translated, I kind of think those things are just for us. And I know what they are, and it's really special to me. It's not enough. It's just not enough to just have one source of representation, you know?
Well, and the middle, I think it was the Middle Eastern Eye, was talking about all of their problems with Rami. And I read through it and I was like, these are valid, but it also just sounds like we just need more shows like this.
Yeah. Like, it shouldn't be the only one. Like, there should be other Muslim American shows, Arab American shows that don't make Rami, because Rami can't tick all your boxes. You know, the show of Rami is not going to do it all for you. The same way fucking like New Girl isn't going to be the epitome of a white show for every person. You know what I mean? Like there's a reason why there are so many white shows that so many different white people gravitate towards. Like, and the same, I hope the same could be true for Latinx shows, for Arab shows, for Asian American shows, and all the different kind of Asian shows, like the Korean, Chinese, Japanese. Like there are so many nuances to representation that I think people take for granted. Like, I think like people see a show like Fresh Off the Boat and they're like, look, they're represented, and it's like, that is one kind of Asian that is not like that's just, and it's also kind of
story.
Exactly. And I think Rami himself has been really open about that, being like, this is just my story, this is just me. And so yeah, I hope that we can continue on this path and give more opportunities and not just be like, look, we did it. And, or not me and you, but like the people that are making these shows happen be like, we already have an Arab show, like, what more do you want? And it's like, well, I want another one. And another one. More. And another one.
I want a lot more.
Yeah.
Because, so I'm actually a mixed race, but I want a story about a Lebanese woman who family assimilated, and now she's digging around and figuring it out. And like, there's a place for that. I'm sick of scarcity mindset. I'm sick of people being like, here's our tokens, we got it, when it can be, we can have so many beautiful stories.
Rami, for example, that family is Egyptian-American. They have a different dialect than Syrian-Americans do.
It's hard for me to understand that.
Yeah, no, it's not a universal dialect. And I would love to write a pilot about a Syrian family. I would and about something that Syrians can relate to, just because even though I'm Syrian, I still related to an Egyptian-American story. Like, there's something beautiful about that. And I know a Syrian story about a Syrian girl or a Syrian family, or even a story like yours, that's the fact that you're mixed race is also a story in and of itself. Like that's, I'm sure people can, and again, a point of a TV show isn't always to be relatable. That's not what I'm trying to say. But when it comes to the idea of representation, there is an element of why does the story need to be told? And the more I think about it, the more it's like I remember feeling invisible, and I remember feeling like I didn't have a place here, and I don't want any Arab girl to ever feel that way ever. I don't want any Syrian girl to ever wonder why there's no Syrians on TV that aren't depicted as terrorists. So yeah, I hope that we get more, and I hope that you and I can make more, and I hope that it's not just a trend, because we're so much more than a headline. We're so much more than a trend or a hashtag. And I think the more we bring people up, other minorities, Black filmmakers, Asian filmmakers, Latinx filmmakers, the more we bring each other up, the more we can all represent each other, because obviously white people aren't doing shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's down to us. And maybe I'm generalizing. Sorry, I have anger. But like, it's not just about, thank you. But thank you for encouraging me. What I'm trying to say is that instead of seeing a statistic, and if you're a minority being like, well, what about me? Because I kind of had that tendency too. I'll admit it. Like, I'll see a statistic about the lack of representation for Latina actresses, and I'll think like, well, this is more than Arab actresses, and I'll have that thought in my head. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not perfect. But correcting that thought and be like, that gets me nowhere. I have to lift them up because they will lift me up too. That's what we have to do. That is productive and constructive, and it doesn't help us to dividing us does not help us at all, whether we're talking about Arabs or marginalized communities in general. It's just about educating yourself and watching films that are from other regions, including this one, and it's just, I don't know. I can rant about this forever, and this is I love it. All I want to talk about for the rest of my life. But yeah, I mean, I guess I brought that up to say I'm not trying to like sit on my high horse and preach to you about like how I know everything. Like, I'm correcting my own thought patterns and trying to do the best I can, recognizing that I also have a good amount of privilege. I can be white passing. I can be different ethnicities if I want to be, because people don't always assume I'm Arab when they look at me. And I have a lighter complexion. So I understand I have privileges. I speak English. That's another privilege. I am in America, another privilege. Well, maybe not anymore. But using your privilege to educate yourself and to do better, and to like this film, Wajib, it is, if you're not familiar with Arab filmmaking, just put it on tonight and really try to see a perspective that you're unfamiliar with. And if you are familiar with a Palestinian perspective, fucking phenomenal. Keep doing you, and share this film with other people. Like, I can recommend other films that are documentaries that are really hard to watch about Palestine, but I think what's more important is humanizing Palestine, humanizing Arabs, that's what Rami does. He humanizes an Arab Egyptian immigrant family. Wajib does the same thing. It humanizes a marginalized community that is so they're treated with such disdain and so inhumanely. And I'll go back to say it's not a political issue, it's a humanitarian issue. So if you like films, watch Arab films and let's like rally together in this. Like it's exhausting doing this by ourselves, I'm not gonna lie. So help us help you, and help me and help you help me.
Absolutely.
It's getting to that time of the conversation where I'm just going to just saying proverbs. I'm kidding.
And not to be too just generally political, but also I don't care. The powers that be, the people that want to keep holding the power, don't want us to work together.
No.
Don't want us to say, we don't like how this is going, and we want to see ourselves, and we want to be in control of how we're seen. Because I don't want to just be either the hijabi woman who is finally free when she falls in love with a white man and takes her hijab off, and I don't want to be the belly dancer.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be me, someone who's anxious and depressed and struggling with being a millennial in America.
Yeah.
With the extra layer of being Lebanese. And so I think it's really important that what you were saying is that we're all working to lift each other up.
I mean, I don't know if you relate to this, but like there are times where I don't feel Syrian enough to write a Syrian story.
Oh, 100%.
And that is so sad to me. Like, who else is going to write it? You know what I mean? Like,
I was thinking when I was putting this film series together is like, I am mixed race. I grew up here. I'm not the person that should be putting this on. And then my like white best friend was like, but no one else is doing it, so you have to. And my place, I do have a place here. And I absolutely recognize that place, like you were saying, comes with a lot of privilege. But I think it's up to us to open doors. Because another thing that was pretty disappointing is I was trying so hard to find, so my criteria for the films were directed by a woman, narrative, not centralizing war and poverty. Mm-hmm. And I really, really, really wanted to include a Sudanese film because colorism is huge in the Arab world.
Yeah.
And we, not we, but people love to pretend that there aren't Black Arabs when there absolutely are, and they're making incredible films. And I just couldn't find any that were streaming, unfortunately. So that's a huge, huge disappointment for this film series because I don't want to pretend that light-skinned Arabs are the only people that exist, but their films are more easy to find, probably for that reason.
Yeah, colorism is a huge thing in Arab culture, and it's a huge thing in a lot of culture, in every culture, if we're being honest.
Proximity to whiteness.
Every culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Asian cultures, Indian cultures, colorism is unfortunately rampant. But I commend you for doing this series, and I'm really honored that you asked me to be a part of it because I love talking about films. I love talking about I love being exposed to more films that I haven't seen. I'll be honest. I didn't see this film until this week. Like now I'm obsessed with it, and I'm an Arab filmmaker, and I have no excuse. But like I'm doing my best, and I'm excited for the future of Arab filmmaking, and I'm trying to be more confident in my own writing and feel like I'm Syrian enough and I'm Arab enough to tell Syrian and Arab stories because no one else is going to do it, and
it's necessary.
And it's so necessary. Like if a white guy has the confidence to write an Arab character in the desert committing a crime, like I should have you know what I mean? Like the audacity that someone has to write in a voice that isn't theirs is appalling sometimes to me.
It's shocking.
So we need to write in our voices, and we need to make our voices heard. And I think the reason why our confidence is shot sometimes is not our fault. It's just because we're not told we can do it, and we're not giving the tools. It's not even about just being seen or being told. It's way bigger than that. It's it's not having the connections. It's not understanding how to do, like, I moved to LA knowing nothing. Like, I knew no one that was working in the industry. Like, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing here. And there's a certain privilege that comes with being connected, with being white, with having going to film school, affording to go to film school, all these things that we're not afforded to. Like, we have to really create our own legacy. And I'm hoping we can do that. And I have faith if we just continue to tell our own stories, hopefully the next generation will be more confident than we are, and because of our stories, you know? Like, that's the least I can hope for, is that my existence makes someone else feel less alone. It makes someone else feel capable of telling their story, and I will feel fulfilled. I mentioned it briefly before, but Capernaum, made by, I'm every time I say it, I don't know if I'm saying it right. I will admit English is my second language, and I don't always pronounce things the way they are supposed to be pronounced, because I read them the way they're supposed to be. Like, I don't know, whatever. I learned English with Hooked on Phonics, literally. But Capernaum, I really love it. It's made by Nadine Lebecki. I assume, even though it was nominated for an Oscar, I don't think it got nearly the attention it deserved. It's not really accessible. Hopefully it can be one day. But there's a lot of reasons why I like this film. And I was lucky to see it. My friend had a pass to a CAA screening in LA, and I happened to go, and I saw it in the theater, and I don't remember the last time I cried that hard. I was like heaving, sobbing after it was over, like disgusting, ugly cries. And I immediately left and went straight to the bathroom in the theater and cried some more. Like, I was inconsolable. And my friend was just like, "Are you okay?" There's a reason why I like this film, though, and it's kind of similar to the kind of realist element that Wajib has. So the lead actor is a 12-year-old Syrian refugee who was actually Syrian refugee at the time. I guess he still technically is, but he was an actor. She used a lot of non-actors, and he is in Lebanon and in Beirut, and it kind of shows the struggle of this boy and what he goes through in a narrative format, but it uses non-actors, and it uses a very real dilemma and place and struggle that really fucked me up. And I have like a soft spot for stories told from a child's point of view. My favorite films are usually like that, whether it's like, I don't know, Ratcatcher or The 400 Blows, or even like a modern example is like The Florida Project. Like, stories from a child's point of view are just so pure to me and so heartbreaking. And Capernaum does a really good job of portraying how connected we all are, because even though it's set in Beirut, you're seeing the lead actor, or the lead character, is a Syrian refugee. He interacts with an Ethiopian immigrant who has a son, and I love that they brought in Ethiopian into art into the mix, because again, there's colorism in Arab cinema, and this wasn't ever, like, I really respect the way she made this film. And I also want to bring it up because she's also an Arab woman, and making this film was a huge feat. But I just thought she did a really good job with tying in how layered we all are. And I didn't know this until I was doing my research before this podcast, but it was the highest grossing Arab film and Middle Eastern film of all time. Like, and I think it's tragic that in spite of that, it's not accessible. Like, it can literally be the best Middle Eastern film, like, box office wise ever, and still not being widely publicized or seen. So I really loved that film. It's not an easy watch. Again, it wrecked me. But I really loved that, like, many of the actors were novices, and I think it really brings a realism to the film that is singular and beautiful. And there's a reason why I avoid Arab films, and there's a reason why I avoid, because for me it's really hard to watch, but I don't regret watching this film. the emotional effect that it had on me was because it was beautiful, and it was phenomenal, and it just it did everything it could for me. It was a child's point of view. It showed how multi-connected we all are, because it wasn't just about Lebanon. It wasn't about Lebanon. It was about Lebanon. It was about Syria. It was about Ethiopia. It was about immigration. It was about race. It was about the idea of a homeland. Displacement is a huge issue right now for a lot of Arabs and just like in the diaspora and all of that. But I really love that film. I'm doing my best to study like early Arab women filmmakers.
Right.
I'm very new to her, but the early shorts of what's her? I'm gonna mispronounce her name, even though it's an Arab name, but Atayat El Abnoudi. She has these early shorts that were filmed in 1971 to 1975, and she's Egyptian. And I saw most of them on YouTube, but she literally is just she's literally just filming like brick makers, or like her documentaries are the films I saw are documentaries, but she was like one of the female pioneers of Arab cinema, especially in Egypt. She was a former lawyer, she was a journalist and an actress, but she started making these films that just depicted life in Egypt. And the one that I saw, it's called Horse of Mud, and it's like 11 minutes, and you're watching these Egyptians making bricks. And I just really loved imagining this woman behind the camera making this film in the 70s. Like, there's something so badass about that, and I'm trying my best to educate myself about the origins of Arab cinema, especially from a female's perspective, because I know for a fact it was hard for her to do that in the 70s. I know for a fact it was hard for her to even become a lawyer in the 70s. So yeah, I'm doing my research for that. And one of my favorite films of all time that isn't by a woman, but I also think he's a phenomenal filmmaker and maybe annoying to even bring up for people that love film, because they probably already know all about him. But Abbas Kiarostami is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I feel like his films really encapsulate like a sense of poetry, and I love poetry, and Close Up is one of my favorite films of all time, bar none. Like, it brings in this real element. Like, they don't use actors. It deals with an actual event that happened that's like kind of retold for the film's sake. So yeah, those are like the three films that I thought I would recommend that are kind of all different. And I need to do some catching up with Arab filmography. Like, I brought up Kiarostami, like he is Persian. He's not necessarily Arab, but even so, watching his films they still fuck me up. Like, they still have like a sense of home to me that I can't deny. Mm-hmm. And Iran is like in the Middle East.
It's in the region, yeah.
I am proud to be Arab, is what I'm trying to say, and I'm really proud to make films as an Arab woman, because it's way harder for us than our like white counterparts. But that's why I think my first recommendation. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like, no, that's not to say that they have it easy at all, but I think my first recommendation would be to somehow try to watch Capernaum, and then maybe the early films of like some Arab filmmakers. But Close Up it just has a soft spot in my heart, because I wanted to bring it up for the element of realism, and for like this dealing with a real thing and then making it into this like fantastical work of poetry. Like, there's just, I think a lot of Middle Eastern filmmakers, Persians and Arabs included, really love poetry. There are so many Arab poets that are like regarded in the highest regard, and same with Persian poets. So I think we have that in common among a lot of things. But my favorite films always have an element of like something really poetic to them. And but yeah, I have a lot of work to do in catching up with my filmography. So I'm excited to like follow along the series, to be honest. Like I'm excited to like to watch the films and to hear you talk about them. I'm so, this is maybe annoying, but like I'm so proud of you to like, I'm so proud that you're doing this, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. And I'm excited for people to watch these films, and I'm excited for people to talk about them. And I was so excited to talk about Wajib immediately after I saw it. I was like, I can't believe I get to talk about it anyways. Like, so thank you. And so yeah, good job. Good fucking job. You're fucking doing it. You're fucking doing it. We need you. The world needs you. Especially now, like, film is such a we're using it to escape. Everything is escape. Like, I just want to get out of here. So if it's like watching a good film, I'll fucking do it. You can follow along on social media if you'd like. My Instagram handle is SheroHero, SheeroHero, and then on Twitter it's SheroHero666 because SheroHero was taken, and also the devil. Also God's dead. No. And I have a website. You can, I mean, it might be in one of my bios, but you can just look me up, Shereen Younes. It's ShereenLani.com. Follow along, and I'd love to have you just on the journey. And I have a podcast if you'd like to listen to it. It's called Ethnically Ambiguous. I host it with my friend who is Iranian-American, and we talk about being women of color, and we have guests on that are people of color and marginalized communities. And we also talk about the news every so often when we can emotionally have the strength. But yeah, that's about it. The last thing I'll plug, even though Amazon's garbage, but I do have a poetry book on Amazon.
I didn't know that.
It's old, so I'm working on my next one, but it's called Dime Piece, like the coin, and then piece, like a piece of a puzzle. But it's called Dime Piece, and it's like 10 years of my poetry from when I was 16 up until I was 26. And so it kind of reads like a diary, and it's very angsty. And I'm hoping my next one is a little better, but I'm really proud of it because it was self-published and I did it pretty spontaneously. But instead of supporting Amazon, if you do want a PDF version, I would rather send it to you via email. And if you want to Venmo me or like contact or like email me if you're interested, and I can like send it to you. And because I'm not really, because Amazon fucking sucks, and I hate Bezos with all my heart. Because he can solve so many things and doesn't lift a finger. Yeah. So if you're interested in the book, and if you do want to get on Amazon, go ahead. And if you'd rather get a PDF, and just like throw me some cash, do that too. But that's the option. And I'm working on my next one, so stay tuned.
That's so exciting.
Thanks again for having me. This was a delight.
Yes, of course. All right. Well, have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Okay.